all that we want. So as we all know here, the Amazon is vital to the stability of the world's climate. It spans 7 million square kilometers, 8 countries, a territory, a home of around 60% of the world's tropical forest and over 10% of its biodiversity. So it's a absolutely fundamental biome. But we also know that there are threats today that need to be reversed. So it's facing the most extreme deforestation in a generation, and over 95% of this is illegal. So relentless clearance of the Amazon could lead to a tipping point. We're gonna hear this from Dolores here today. And all we need to avoid is that this big forest turns into a savanna. So put simply, environmental crime poses an existential risk, not only to the achievements of the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, and to our ambition of getting to zero deforestation. So the Igarapé Institute, the Science Panel for the Amazon, and ICFI are hosting this seminar precisely to discuss the risks, but especially the innovative solutions to protect the forest and enable sustainable development. So we are fortunate to have a truly outstanding group of speakers joining us today. So let me just set this morning agenda. So the first speaker, who will not be the first, I will accommodate him, but I'll start with him, Jamil Ahmad, Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at UNEP in New York. So he will just join possibly after Dolores to underline the importance of the Amazon to global climate regulation and biodiversity. Then we're very pleased to have Dolores Armenteras, who is a professor at the Universidad Nacional de Colombia and a co-chair of the Science Panel for the Amazon, who will provide some insight into the Amazon today, the context that we can just hope also to improve. After this, I'll focus on some key challenges of environmental crime and how to strengthen the rule of law to reduce deforestation and enable the development that we want to see. I'll then invite Roberto Vag, who's in my right, founder of the Amazon Consultation, to provide some reflections on the importance of partnerships for sustainable development solutions. And finally, we're very fortunate to have our leader here, Isabella Teixeira, with us, who will hopefully take us to the future with some reflections, close remarks, but also just talking a bit on the relationships of the Amazon and geopolitics of climate. So Isabella is a former Minister for the Environment in Brazil. She's also the co-chair of the International Resource Panel and Senior Fellow at Arapiaú. So I'll then open for Q&A. So we hope to save around 30 minutes for that. And it's Giovanna that is here will help us to get the questions from the audience, but also we're gonna have questions for the online audience. So please send your questions through the Zoom's Q&A chat function. So before we start, I would also like to just thank the Baha'i International Center and for hosting this event today with us. Thank you so much. So I'll pass to Dolores, who will start her presentation.
Thank you very much. Joanna. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, the organizers, for inviting me. And my name is Dolores Armenteras. I'm professor of landscape ecology and global change at the National University of Colombia. And I'm officially co-chair since yesterday of the scientific panel of the Amazon. So this is the first time they announced me as such. So I was just like, oh yes, I did say yes to that. Anyway, I'm here to, I was asked to set the setting for this meeting, just explain a little bit why the Amazon is important and why it matters to all of us, right? So Giovanna, if you can help me with the slides. It's always good to just a quick reminder of figures so simple as that half of the tropical forests of the world are in South America. So first of all, we have to locate ourselves, and it's always good to remember this, and also that the Amazon basin, next, because I have a lot of pictures and not so many text. So 7.5 million approximately square kilometers belong to the Amazon basin, the Amazon as a whole, of which, and I have to always also remind people of this, because as it is happening in this room, many are dominated by Brazilians, but our basin is basically, Giovanna, if you can next, it's 62% Brazilian, the Amazon, but 38% rocks. It belongs to other countries. species, and we must not forget this. Especially since I work in northwestern Amazon, I always have to remind people of this because we have this tendency. So 38%, it's split in 8 other countries, depends again of the division you use to explain about the tropical forest of the Amazon. In any case, next. Some people would say, and we have all heard about the Amazon being the lungs of the planet. But certainly one thing that I think we must not forget is the heart, the biodiversity heart of the planet. And as such, 10% of the species, of the well-known species, are in this part of the planet. Next. More or less, both plant and animal species alive are in this section of the planet. So this is really something we have to keep remembering because it has the importance of having over 50,000 vascular plants known, even more to get to know in the next years, still discovering species. And also with other groups of biodiversity, we have over 1,500 bird species known in the Amazon, also mammals, over 400, 30 known mammal species. I mean, we're talking about big numbers of species for the planet. Also, not to forget amphibians, reptiles, and groups that are perhaps less attractive to many of us, but also that are key for the functioning of the system. So it depends also of the reference you used, at least over 2,400 fish species. And some people say that they really are over 3,000 species of fishes in the Amazon. 50% of those they only exist there, nowhere else in the world. So we're talking about species that are very important in terms of biodiversity, functioning of ecosystems, freshwater ecosystems, but also for food security for many populations that live there. Another important aspect that we must not forget is not just the biological diversity, but the cultural diversity and the presence of human populations in the area. And this is a picture of Colombia. Since I work in Colombia, I have to bring some pictures of Colombia just to give you a different perspective. But this is one of the sites with these Holocene, how do you call them? I forgot the name. This is the Bruno of my English, the Holocene pictures. Over 35 million people inhabit this territory, of which around 2.23 million people are from indigenous groups. And again, 350 ethnic groups, 300 indigenous languages. We're talking about an incredible amount of diversity in this part of the world. And if we go further, to next. This is also very important. I mean, 20% of the global water circulates over the Amazon. So this is as important as one single tree is said to circulate at around 1,000 liters per day, which is, I don't know, maybe 3 bathtubs of a big bathtubs or whatever per day. So every single tree that gets cut down, I mean, it has huge implications in terms of water circulation for the planet. Next. Also, it really drains a lot of fresh water to the oceans, and between 18-22%, again, it will really depends on the figures, but 20% of the ocean freshwater discharge comes from the Amazon. That's a lot. I mean, this is just one area that has too much importance for all of us in terms of what's going on at the global level. Also, yeah, we all know, and if not, just remember that forests capture CO2, emit oxygen. It has a lot to do with the circulation of the climate, and the mitigation of the climate. And then again, every single tree has an importance on this. If the system doesn't work, carbon is not uptake, it's not a storage, and then it's released to the atmosphere, and we are in feedback and a tremendous impact in terms of climate change. Finally, just to set the scene for what's going on, and I think we're going to be discussing about this is about the threats. And perhaps the best known, the more known for everybody is the deforestation. And deforestation is a big threat, it's a big problem. We're going to be talking about it. But over 1 million square kilometers have been deforested since the 1990s. So that's a lot of forest that has been cut down. And since 3 years ago, it's going up. Is rising deforestation rates all over the basin, which is the most worrying situation. But one of the other things that is not perhaps so well known is that the degradation of forests is not well known because it's not easy to quantify when a forest seems a forest, but it's not a forest, healthy forest anymore. So there are some estimations of around another 1 million square kilometers deforested today, also since the 90s. So this means less forest cover, this means less number of trees, less number of animals, and this has several implications in terms of the whole functioning of the basin. Next, Joanna. The causes of this deforestation we will talk about. There's some conversion to agriculture. The problem is when standing forests are cut down for conversion to agriculture, but then also the use of forest fires as a tool to convert those forests. This is a big problem. We're having fires all over the world. The planet is on fire nowadays. I don't think anybody has not seen what's going on anywhere where you look when there's a dry season, wherever it corresponds to, at the time that it corresponds to seasonality, wherever. So forest fire is a problem, but then we have also in the basin, and again, I had to bring some of the points from Colombia because you have social conflicts, socio-ecological conflicts. This is one example. The only one I'm bringing with, I'm a scientist, I publish things relating to science, but this is the only one I bring with 1 year after the peace agreement in Colombia, the deforestation went up, the fires went up, even inside protected areas in Ative. We are still having a big problem with deforestation in the northwestern part of the Amazon in Colombia. And also, one of the problems that we cannot ignore in the northwestern part of the Amazon are the illicits, which I'm trying to link to what's going to be discussed here, which is the illicit and illegal activities. Sometimes illegal and not having the permission to do something doesn't necessarily mean illicit, I guess. But the thing is that illicit crops is a problem that drives not only deforestation, a lot of socio-economic problems, socio-ecosystem problems, and also a long-standing situation that has not been solved yet in many of the countries. Plus illegal mining, because we are having a big wave of gold mining. In fact, I was reading the other day, I think it was 1 gram, or I don't remember the figures, but in any case, 1 gram of 1 weight unit of illicit coca was worth 1/50 of the gold, and gold from Colombia, for instance, is being exported illegally in many cases, so it's much easier. So we are having big problems with illegal mining, illegal dredges all over the watershed, and also illegal immigration through the borders of miners from one country crossing to the other. So you have a lot of political problems there. And then obviously, again, all this implies that if we have a degradation of the forest, contamination of the freshwater systems, deforestation, the water circulation globally gets affected. So it's really much more serious than many of us are aware. Rainfall decreases, circulation stops happening, then you have an increase on temperatures, and you have a lot of impacts that go from increase of floodings in some areas, more droughts, then you have more fires, and then more fires, more emissions, more climate change, and one of those feedback circles that never stop. Even some of those might go to the Caribbean for, for visiting the coast, and even some of the sargassum blooms in the Caribbean have been associated to deforestation in the Amazon. This is a situation that we need to act somehow and work on it. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to discuss about these things further.
Thank you so much, Dolores. And I think we started with the beauty. I want to remember the Amazon is the heart, as Dolores is saying. My presentation that follows brings, I think, goes a little deeper into the problems, but then we're going to go into solutions, I promise, because we don't want to be only talking about problems. And I think that's why we have this table and much more people involved in the issue, because we really need to think together. So Giovanna, please, I'll just start a quick presentation. So I'll take the moderator hat for a second to talk to you a little bit about the work we're doing to strengthen the rule of law, to reduce land deforestation and other what we call environmental crimes, to enable sustainable development. So just very briefly, we are this Brazilian think and do tank, but that we work globally since 2011. So women-led, which I think is important also for the issues that we're talking here, very prone to cooperation, focused on digital, citizen digital and climate security. And today I'm going to be focusing on climate security. So we came to this issue with this security lens to be able to enable then the security that we need to just think about sustainable development. So Dolores started saying here, and I'm just gonna touch, we know that illicit deforestation and environmental crime are exacting a heavy toll on the climate, biodiversity, and livelihoods of people who live in the Amazon. But although the direct damages, the impacts are really felt, and people there are suffering, and we want to also call attention to that. There are negative externalities, and I don't like to call like that, but we still call that if they were just externalities that are impacting and affecting much further than the Amazon basin. So we need to discuss that as a global issue, not only a regional or country-based issue. So we know that we have a problem. So today I would say that the problem of the Amazon got to the debate. Many people understand today that there is a illegal economy kind of problem, but we still need to understand the scope, the scale, the impacts to be able then to really plan for the solutions that we need to get. So most of our work has been, we started really focusing on scope, scale, dynamics of what was happening. So we could then plan for the solutions that would be standing. So I think a quick reminder, there is so much potential in the region, be for bioeconomy, for biotechnology, for carbon markets, for ecotourism, for the whole biodiversity credits that we have to discuss. This is a graph from a professor here from New York, Salo Kozlowski, that shows the potential of the bioeconomy of the forest and how different countries are, placed in the market today. As a Brazilian, and just taking Colombia Dolores here, I just look at the potential that it has for the country to just develop an economy that is compatible with the standing forest. And we're really like a tiny piece, a tiny percentage of what could be. So for instance, the Brazil nut that we all know here, Brazil exports only 5% of the Brazil nut to the world. So there's so much potential to develop economies that are just compatible with the forest. And I think that's a key message for anyone that wants to go there. Responsible investment is welcome, and there is room, a lot of room for that. So our priorities for action to be able then to get there is to first understand what we today call this ecosystem of environmental crime, to then strengthen the governance and partnerships that are needed for the region to enable the private sector, the markets, and the public-private partnerships to come with the solutions. So when we started to look into what was going on, like below the canopy, we had to start with the typology to understand what was going on. So as Dolores said, not everything is typified as a crime. So many activities are informal, illicit, different typification of crimes in different countries in the region. So we needed to understand what were the drivers of these illicit economies and how to also analyze, because these are trans-border issues, but we don't talk the same language when it comes to criminal justice with our neighbors around what's going on there. So we did a sociological typology, and from there we applied in case studies in Brazil, Peru, and Colombia. Now we're gonna soon launch a regional case study as well. And we came up with the first findings of what we call this environmental crime ecosystem that I'm gonna briefly explain to you. So the main environmental crimes that we see that are taking place with huge impact on deforestation, and this is important, we were analyzing the ones that had the biggest impacts on deforestation, but as Dolores said, there's degradation and there are other issues going on there. So we see the illegal deforestation per se, the public land grabbing, illegal logging, illegal mining, and agriculture and livestock farming rife with illegalities. So when we saw that as a motivation for public security enforcement, we understand that on the development of these crimes, we saw what we call the converging crimes acting together. So administrative crimes, financial and tax-related crimes, violent crimes, several types of trafficking, organized crime. So environmental crimes, they're not happening standing alone. They're really integrated in a very complex ecosystem, and that's important for several reasons you can pass. So first, environmental crimes are treated even for law enforcement many times as second-class crimes, as if they didn't matter. So once we understood that they were also in the chain of the crimes related to crimes that are seen or perceived to be more serious. So we have also an opportunity to call attention and just to prioritize the inclusion of these crimes in the top priority for public security institutions as well. So we did an analysis of 5 years of the federal police. This is a Brazil federal police operations between 2016 and 2021 to understand these relationships on the ground. So on the top column, you're going to see the main hypothesis. So the police were looking at all these operations. They started with one of those 5 top crimes in mind, but when they developed, they were, the prosecution and the conviction were related to several other crimes as well, as you see in the left column. And I'm not going to go in detail, but all these publications are available online. Then we just did a second study based on the first one to understand where were those convictions or where were those activities taking place that were being prosecuted by the police and the criminal justice system afterwards. So we saw that they were all over Brazil. Although the biggest numbers were in the region, there were actors in 24 out of the 27 states in Brazil. Just to say, there is really an organized crime apparatus that is operating to destroy and to profit from the forest. And it's important also to know the next step of our research will be to understand the financial crimes and where the money is going, because we know it's not benefiting the people in the region. It's important to say that now I'm going to speak about the Brazilian Amazon, but it's not very different from the other countries. The human progress index there is very low. The life expectancy is very low. So all the social indicators are very low. So it's not that these illicit economies are helping people there. It's not true. So other people are benefiting. And as we can see, it's in the case of Brazil, it's all over Brazil. And also some of these operations were also taking place in other countries in the region. And this is just a snapshot into the acting of the federal police in Brazil. There are several other organizations, but they're the ones that are doing the bulk of the prosecution of environmental crimes. So this is just the same study, just showing per illicit economy where, let's say, the criminal activity is taking place. Also available online. And we also did a case study for Colombia and for Peru. And what we find is very similar dynamics, although the products of the illegalities may differ as Dolores said, there's like coca crops in parts of Colombia and Peruvian Amazonian. There is also palm oil issues that are there. But when we see the dynamics and the main drivers are pretty much the same. And I think there are many options and opportunities for collaboration also within, among these countries. So I'm not gonna go in details, the same map we have for Peru. So just a few headlines from this first part of our research. So as I said, there is this ecosystem of environmental crime in the Amazon. So the main drivers of this deforestation are land grabbing, illegal logging, mining, and encroachment of farming and livestock that are rife with illegalities, and there are several kinds of illegalities possible there. And in the countries in the region, there's this variation of the products, but the dynamics are pretty much comparable. So fraud and corruption are very central when we come not only for like laundering the money, but laundering the products, making them become like legal and being sold as if they were legal in the market. So the chains are full of other crimes that allow for the product then to be sold. There's this complex network of actors, and so it's also part of the research you're doing in the territories and also analyzing like a set of cases. And we need to understand that they are like the ones that are profiting most, possibly not even in the region. So we're going to be able to tell more about the dynamic cash flows and how this is operating soon, because that's the stage of the research that we're undergoing now. Promote the kind of cooperation that we need regionally and internationally. So we always like to remind everyone that crime cooperates. Many times law enforcement institutions, criminal justice institutions don't cooperate. So they are winning this game, and we need cooperation, from the people that are concerned with the governance of the region to be able then to face these organizations. So I didn't mention in the first part of the research the trafficking of wildlife, so animals and species, but it's of course widespread in the basin. And when it comes to degradation, it's a serious issue. We don't have, in our perspective, in terms of when we request the data from public institutions, we don't have a good set of data to analyze the same way we're analyzing the other crimes, but we're looking for like to build with organizations that are devoted to this study how we can advance there as well. So in the case of Brazil, illegal logging and wildcat mining are the most common categories of environmental crime, the ones that police prosecutes most. And as I said, coca cultivation is also present in other countries in the Amazon basin. This brings also, let's say, not only the money, but also a more violent dynamic associated with organizations that are there. And as Dolores said, unfortunately, there are drivers also in the commodities market. So the price of gold are driving also the drug trafficking organizations into the gold mining. And this brings many challenges because much bigger equipment, so much more, let's say, savvy ways of distribution. So we see this in Brazil, we see this in Colombia, we see this in the border with Venezuela, we see this in Peru. So we need the rule of law, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. So before that, sorry, there is something very important. Lens. So, beyond the work we're doing to map environmental crime, we're trying to understand with women defenders in the Amazons, all the types of violence that they are facing the day-to-day. Today, we have 14 women defenders from Brazil, Colombia, and Peru working with us on the ground to understand from her own peers the types of violence and how are the responses, how to improve the responses, how to strengthen the protection networks so they are safe. Today, women are in the front line. Sometimes not only the threats are not only from outside their communities, sometimes also from inside, when there is some sort of co-option of people from their communities, they are the ones that are facing several types of violence. And that's what we're trying to understand, to be able also to influence policy, to influence cooperation in the right direction. And this is an issue that we really need to call attention to, because they are in the front line. Generally, women are the most intimidated and threatened these days, and unfortunately also killed in some situations. And I think this deserves not only national attention, but international attention as well. So now to solutions. So in the first pillar of solutions, which is what we call strengthening governance and partnerships, we've been trying to identify gaps on the institution's work, to be able also to provide, let's say, the proposals and the new architecture that we're going to have to rebuild in the case of Brazil, and to foster that Brazil and Colombia and Peru and the other countries in the region can cooperate. So we just launched what we call a multidimensional security agenda for the Amazon, and full of proposals for hopefully the governments to take over very soon. We're also working with international organizations such as Interpol, UNODC, to promote this build of trust. We're building trust between law enforcement, prosecutors, and other environmental agents between Peru, Colombia, and Brazil. Also waiting for better days of cooperation. It's sad to say that there are, let's say, the organizations, but there's not a lot of effort or not a lot of priority in the cooperation between the countries, among the countries of the region. And we're promoting this 1.5 track to push that. And we're also taking these issues to national, regional, and international networks, because we believe that we need attention, and we need the partnerships to just push for the right solutions. And our this third pillar of work is just to try to then enable sustainable development. It's the line of work that we're prioritizing private sector, but also financial sector, be from promoting technologies to improve traceability. There's a lot happening in pilot projects. There are big markets such as the EU that already demands traceability, for example, of beef. So it's possible to just do like a leapfrog in the sense of traceability of the supply chains that are linked to the forest, and we need that to happen. So we've been working also to develop dashboards to improve risk analysis of territorial, what we call the territorial matrix of risks, to also promote the transition plans for companies that are trying to clear their supply chains let's say, are more comprehensive. So we call that we need the ESG AAA, which is not only about global metrics, it's about the operations on the ground. It's about the matching of companies' risks with the territorial risks, so we can be able to also push and bring the private sector, the financial sector on board. So this for us is very important, and we've been having very interesting conversations with financial market players, private companies, but also the carbon markets companies that are entering these regions and need also to perform, to validate their credit on the social environmental aspects of the work. So I'm not gonna take a lot of time, but we just really believe that traceability is really key. Today, the existing metrics still we lack the amount of let's say rankings and even companies that declare, for example, the deforestation in their compliance is very, very small. So we see that 2/3 of the world supply chains have no rules on illegal deforestation yet and degradation. And we need to be able, if there is a problem, especially with degradation of measurement, we need to move in that direction very quickly. So we understand that, as I said, that there's a lot of potential for these local economies to be driven by sustainable solutions. So briefly to put the issue on the agenda, we also work with communication and outreach. This is a platform that we publish constantly stories and data. It's called Ecocrime Platform. And we try to also push these issues on different events and media all over the world. So these are the partners we have today, and also we think we need to bring many more. And I'll just stop here. Thank you so much. And just going back to my moderator role, I would just like to invite Roberto back, because Roberto is leading also a great effort on the partnership front. And I think after my presentation that brings, I think, a more seriousness here, I think Roberto can bring us back to to the table and working together. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you. Well, of course, the challenges we have when we deal with the Amazon are very complex, and we need to let's say, embrace this complexity. And the complexity demands something like what we are calling an integrated strategic agenda for the region. So the solution will come from the different actors, different sectors of the society, and that is one of the goals of the Brazilian consultation for the Amazon. I'll talk a little bit about the Brazilian consultation. It was created, it's a movement that was created 2.5 years ago. And the idea is supported by 5 pillars. The first one is what we call development agenda. As I mentioned, an integrated development agenda, which encompasses the different elements of what we can call development. But a very important thing is that we are not talking about the traditional development concept. Yeah, we need to develop something completely different from the traditional development agenda that comes from the north. And basically, this development agenda needs to encompass conservation as one of the most important pillars, which is completely different from, let's say, the traditional development agenda from the northern countries. So, and that is to be developed. We don't know yet how to deal with conservation as a very important economic and social pillar. To face this challenge, there is no way to move ahead without the participation of the private sector. So, of course, civil society is one of the most important actors in this, let's say, discussion, bringing light to all the challenges that we have, the academic world as well. But we believe that the participation of the private sector is absolutely crucial. Without the participation of the private sector, we will not get there. Basically, because when we talk about civil society and academy, we talk about tens of millions of dollars, and when we consider the private sector, we are dealing with tens of billions of dollars. So the big transformation of the region is driven by the private sector, and without the deep inclusion of the private sector in that discussion, we will probably not get there. That's the second pillar of the consultation. The third pillar of the consultation, Ilona already addressed, is governance. We need to redesign governance of the region, considering the different levels, the municipality, the states, the federal, and the international. So these 4 different levels must be, in our view, completely redesigned. Command and control is one example where the governance system is just not working. Education, health. So in every sector you look at, we don't see the governance system working. And of course, the other pillar closely related to governance is the institutional development, the rules of the game, the tacit and the informal rules of the game. So once we address the governance, we also need to redesign the basic set of rules that must be used to govern the region under this new development concept, which is based on much higher value of conservation and cultural components. So the present institutional framework especially in Brazil, but I believe that can be also applied to Amazon basin in general, does not really address the importance of these two elements, conservation and culture, as it should be considered when we deal with this complexity that we are facing in the Amazon. The fifth pillar is culture. So no way to move ahead in that discussion without having culture at the same level of science and the rational elements. Culture is the link that we must establish with the population that lives in the Amazon, and without really putting the cultural component at the same level of importance of the other components, the economy and all the scientific elements, it will be very difficult to get the support of the local population to this new, let's say, concept of development. What we see today is just the opposite. The population is getting more and more connected to, let's say, the deforestation agenda, to the illegality, because they don't have any other alternative. So the same approach that I'm commenting here on the concept of the Brazilian consultation for the Amazon was somehow the pillar of the Brazilian coalition on climate, forest, and agriculture. Basically, there is more focus on land use and climate, but these two movements are working together on this challenge. If we consider the Brazilian consultation is about 500 different actors, individuals, companies, academy, every type of, let's say, stakeholders that have some type of interest in the Amazon. And in the case, and the companies, of course, the business sector and the financial sector. In the case of the Brazilian coalition, is basically the agribusiness sector working together with the civil society on the development of new approaches on land use and the impacts on climate change. Why, in our view, this is so important? Because this integrated agenda definitely needs to involve different types of actors and different sectors of the economy. In the case of the consultation, sectors like mining, yesterday we had a very interesting discussion with the largest mining companies in Brazil on their role on the illegal mining. So, of course, basically they are not involved on illegal mining, the formal companies, the big mining companies, but they have a very important influence in the mining sector as a whole. Same thing considering the beef sector. So of course, you have different actors in the beef sector, very, let's say, formal and organized companies, living very close to the completely illegal players in the sector, and the reputation of the industry is getting worse and worse because of this, let's say, fluid way to deal with the illegality. So the role of what we call the chain code coordinators of the beef sector on controlling the illegalities, traceability absolutely crucial, is of major importance. So what we are trying to bring in the consultation is basically the role of what we call the chain coordinators, the big corporations, to get involved on the solutions, because basically they are suffering reputational damages related to what's happening in the Amazon, like Ilona presented. So to move ahead in this agenda, to come up to a new, let's say, new environment, the participation of these big corporations, not only working on their activities, but also on advocacy, also influencing public policies, is of major importance. We don't see the that all the solution will come only from the public policy. Of course, governance is of major importance, but it's a combination of the civil society, the chain coordinators, large corporations, the financial sector, and the government, acting together on the design of this new integrated agenda. We don't see any possibility to face the challenges that was presented by Ilona without combining education, health, all the elements related to infrastructure, the components on access to internet and this type of frontiers, science and technology, new financial tools, tax incentives, all these elements put together, and that is what the Brazilian consultation is trying to bring. That the framework of this agenda was presented in Glasgow last year and will be presented this year, not only in Egypt, but also in Canada. One of the ideas and one of the concepts that we are trying to put together is the biodiversity and the climate agenda. We believe that this new, let's say, conservation economy, which is absolutely crucial for the region, must be based on this combination of climate and biodiversity, which is something that is not really happening in the international agenda as it would happen. Finally, one of the concepts that the consultation is using is the concept of Amazons. We don't see that the existence of one Amazon. So we have the region is very heterogeneous, and at least we need to have specific agendas for the conserved areas. So the Amazon, the conservation agenda is one thing. What we call the transition area, unfortunately, transition, but it's the Amazon and the tracks, the Amazon that is now being converted, requires a specific strategy, which is completely different from the strategy on the converted area. So the converted area, basically commodities production. One example of the key elements there is traceability, but there are others. For instance, fiscal incentives, financial incentives that are now getting to the commodities production should be redesigned and somehow also affect the conservation agenda. So a combination of the incentives, the subsidies, the fiscal and financial policies is one of the elements that we believe must be put in place on the converted areas. And finally, very important, the urban Amazon. The urban Amazon is something that is somehow completely different from the reality of the forest, but has a huge influence on what happens in the forest and also requires specific strategies and specific agendas. So basically, these challenges requires a multitude of actors, multitude of different players, different sectors. It's a multi-stakeholder agenda, and as you know, multi-stakeholder approach is not something very easy to develop. But I think that I see at least a very positive move on engagement of different organizations and different sectors on this goal of trying to get a new concept of development for the region. But we need to consider since the beginning that we are talking about a completely different concept of development, and this is to be developed. We don't know yet how to deal with all this challenge and to, let's say, to frame this new concept. So I think that is the challenge, is to have this systemic approach and integrated approach to address all this.
is an invitation. So join the consultation for the Amazon. And I would like to pass also to Jamil Ahmad. And I think it's a good link because he's talking about the multi-stakeholder partnership that is coming, in this case from Brazil. And I hope also the consultation will become regional and encompass the other countries of the Amazon basin. And Jamil could just tell us a bit of the multilateral front, how do you see this issue? So I already introduced you, but with you present here, Jamil Ahmad is the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at UNEP in New York. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to come and sit among you and listen to this very absorbing, interesting, and important discussion this morning. I'm happy to see Nabila here, who has been a great supporter of environment at UNEP for a long time, a good friend of UNEP over the years. The importance of Amazon to sustainable development cannot be overestimated. We cannot deny that the big role that it plays, not only as a carbon sink, but also as a host to so much of biodiversity. It is host to almost 10% of the world known biodiversity and 40% of the world remaining forests are located here. So in that sense, achieving strategic objectives for climate stability and for living in harmony in nature will not be possible if the ecosystem of Amazon are lost, or its integrity is questioned, degraded. So conserved Amazon rainforest provide important ecosystem services such as high biodiversity, climate regulation, carbon storage, and livelihood for billions of people. Human-driven impacts such as deforestation, wildfires, and induced changes in climate and are disrupting the Amazon forest integrity and stability. It is, as I said, therefore fundamental to achieve sustainable development, not only for the Amazon countries, but for the region and for the globe as a whole, in particular, considering that the large-scale climate and biodiversity impact of the tipping points of Amazon are surpassed. Current threats, such as deforestation and wildfires, can change the role of Amazon from a carbon dioxide sink to a carbon source, which will definitely threaten and worsen the climate crisis that we are facing today. Changes in essential hydrological cycles that are regulated by the Amazon rainforest would dramatically have negative implications for the whole region, the whole continent. The loss of forest will irremediably imply the loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services that it provides, which will have devastating impacts and consequences for human well-being, not only for the communities that inhabit this ecosystem, but also for the regions and the global levels. The impact of degradation of the Amazon transcends the ecosystem itself, and this needs no repetition. The region is important in many other aspects of its services that Amazon provides to global stability, climate, and biodiversity. So if we are to address the environmental crisis at this level, at this global scale, the protection of the Amazon is therefore central. The action and decision we take today at the local, national, you refer to the local and municipal levels, will be important and will determine whether or not it will be possible to move towards a sustainable path. Another key message that I would like to highlight here is that there are, in terms of rule of law and implementation of rule of law frameworks, which have been referred to by the previous panelists, there are multiple multilateral environmental agreements, in particular the Rio Conventions, other initiatives and policies at national levels also, that provide a basic and solid framework for collective action, for conservation, for restoration, and for sustainable use of Amazon ecosystem. We can argue that in this regard, there is clarity also from the governments, and their commitment from governments. There are more than 100 leaders committed to end and reverse deforestation by 2030 last year at the COP meeting. However, what is missing is a strong element of implementation. If we give some specific focus to implementation at all these levels, whether starting right from the local authorities to the provincial and then upwards, we can, I think, move in the right direction. So it is essential that, therefore, for them to strengthen the institutions that Roberto mentioned, the institutional links that are there in the Amazon basin will have to be more robust, and also to cooperate on transboundary levels for international cooperation on these issues. I must mention the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, ACTO, which illustrates the capability of developing and implementing regionally coordinated cross-border policies for sustainable development. Stemming from ACTO, regional agreements such as the Ative Pact is another example, which reiterate the importance of coordination and also recognize that implementation of conservation efforts can be further enhanced with the participation of indigenous people and women. Solutions for the Amazon must necessarily include the perspective and active participation of indigenous peoples and local communities. The UN gives a lot of emphasis to this. The region has seen alarming and systemic murders of indigenous environmental defenders, leading to a human rights emergency declaration written by the coordinator of indigenous organizations of the Amazon basin. Needless to say that the protection of Amazon is critical not only to realize the human rights to a healthy environment also, because the General Assembly last year in July, this year in July, declared that right to a healthy environment is a human right. And that is one of the most important developments that perhaps the environmental rule of law domain has seen in the recent months and years. So it is necessary to uphold the environmental rule of law and environmental justice to guarantee fundamental rights of life, health, minimum subsistence, freedom, and human dignity. Without a healthy environment, the fundamental right of children and future generations cannot be guaranteed. Our champion of the earth, Nimonte Nimpimo, famously said that the struggle we do is for all humanity, because we all live connected to the land. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me make a few more remarks before I hand over back. And another important element I must mention is the creation and management of protected areas. This has a very deep impact to increase the participatory governance of the basin and also guarantees through the COSO agreement, which looks at this. The role of judges cannot be ignored. In the Amazon region, it has demonstrated the support for development and environmental law at the global and regional level. Some of the recent decisions of judicial decisions in the region reflect a high technical expertise on environmental knowledge and connection. And the third important message that I want to highlight here is that the Amazon biome should be regarded as a global priority to transition towards a nature-positive economy. Many of the drivers of degradation that we heard this morning are linked to global economy, in particular to supply chains in agricultural and mineral commodities, as Dolores explained. Improving the transparency and traceability of products linked to direct or indirect deforestation in the Amazon ecosystems or affecting the Amazon indigenous people or local communities will be essential. And in this, I must highlight that there is the new EU rules on deforestation, which are a good example of market-based regulations and approaches that needs to be implemented at the larger level. Illegal economies and activities are having an increasing toll. We have heard how these activities of illegal crops or land grabbing or illegal mining or other cases of extension of cropland and pastures are having a very bad impact on all these. So combating these criminal activities will only be possible through well-coordinated, coherent and long-term international cooperation, for which the UN is playing its own role by working through these multilateral organizations, multilateral environmental agreements that we would refer to UNODC and others. The UN is very much behind this supporting the international and coherent cooperation. Let me refer to the Dasgupta review on the economics of biodiversity, which is a very famous publication, recent one, which says that global economies, livelihoods, and well-being all depend on our precious asset that is nature. The Amazon biome is at the front line of the transformation of the global economy needed to address the environmental crisis and to attain the sustainable development goals. We all know the sustainable development goals are a bit off track, and the Secretary General is trying hard to work with member states to put them back on track and to accelerate the implementation of SDGs. That's a universal framework. Amazon is very much part of that work. So if we work together to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs and 2030 agenda, it will have a salutary effect on all regions, especially the Amazon. Let me conclude by another quote from the Dasgupta review, which says that the solution starts with understanding and accepting a simple truth. Our economies are embedded within nature, not external to it. So with this message, I thank you and I look forward to a good discussion.
Thank you so much. I mean, very important that you just reminded us there are so many frameworks. We're missing implementation, and I think we got some help with the new frame and a very much needed one on environment as a human right. I think that's truly a human right, and to remind us also of the role of indigenous people, because nothing will really stand if they're not in the center of the policies that we're thinking here. They've been the guardians there, so they have to be consulted and be part of the solution. So with that, I would like just to pass to Isabella for her reflections, closing remarks, but also to take us to a better future, Isabella, on your hands.
Okay, thank you very much, Lorna. First of all, thank you for inviting me to come to New York and to have an opportunity to meet some friends like Jamil and also Rebecca. It's very nice. It's always amazing to be back to New York. Okay, second, let's see how we can approach this, all the things that you shared today, considering the new global perspective, you can say, if I can name this. I understand that we are now in an age, in this century, that we have the convergence between climate age and also digital and technological age. This means that the things will change, or in my opinion, changed. Okay, we don't know how much yet, but changed. This is very important to be observed, because if we go into this debate internationally and also nationally, we need to understand better not only the human rights, but also the civil rights, the impacts on civil rights. And the other side, the citizenship, what will be the citizenship that will emerge from this new world, and also democracy. I think three pillars, in my opinion, that when you go into geopolitical world, when you discuss the new power that's coming, that is a transformative, it's very important to observe the role of nature. So my first point here is that it's true, we changed, okay? The institution, we have an evolution for the institutional and political framework, the international world, and also nationally and regionally, in my opinion. And second, I think that the society move forward, they have pressure, they need answers. The new generation put pressure on us, okay? My generation, not necessarily will see, but we survived. It's very important to observe this. And I think that when you go into this world, we need to understand better a new dimension, a new political dimension, not only the global one, this is a planetary global one, because planetary dimension is new for the political world, for the politics, for the geopolitics, because the things are connected, and the countries are not connected, and the societies are not connected yet, okay, politically. We are based on for internet and et cetera, but politically, I think that we need to reframe our relationship. We need to understand better our commitments, our core responsibilities, and how we should play, consider not only the North and South cooperation, but the West and the Eastern world that's emerged. Another point to be observed here is that nature is also a new geopolitical asset. And this is also new. If you come to the past, you remember that in 1992 Rio conference, we worked hard to have a convention to preserve forests, and the countries were against. We have a declaration, okay, not a convention. And now forest is a big asset. Okay, so it's very important to understand the planetary dimension, the nature role. This is new, really new, because this means that we have the South-South power. We have the assets and should have the solutions. Not necessarily have this, okay? And also we need to make clear how this natural asset will allow to emerging economies to make sense that have a transformative role. Because based on the past, it's impossible to have a future. And everyone knows about this, it's true, okay? But even the institution, my feeling, my dear Jamil, is that you don't have the pace, the political pace that you need to change. Yet we have this conflict between transition of the politics of transition versus the politics of transformation. The different things. We need to understand what phasing down means, what phasing out means, and what's happened today in the world makes clear that we don't understand this. Okay, absolutely. And my third point here, because I try to manage my time, I know that you don't want to kill me. Everyone knows that I like to talk, I like to speak, but I don't have much time, okay? When you go into climate geopolitics, it's very important to understand what is the key issue that emergent key issues, like water security. It's fascinating. Water security, it's not water resource, it's water security. It's food security, it's energy security, and also social security. And this is very, because we have climate justice, we have different expressions, different constituents that are coming, but indeed, we need to feel safe. And unfortunately, we are not. So I think that what you need to understand here is that we are looking forward to address well-being, but we need to understand better less security, a less risk society. And this means how the South will come, in my opinion, should come, because you have not only the assets, but as Dolores showed to us, you can fire the world, okay, without Putin. It's very important to observe this. So it's another way to fire the world, and it's very interesting how this global South, or the South-South, or green South, you can name it different perspectives, and also we have population, consumers, and producers together. Okay, and this is very important to observe when you go into this context to understand better, indeed, the new tracks, the new ways that you need to promote the strategic role of the green global South. And it's not only to finance and develop a role in some solutions, it should have developed world coming into the role as a contemporary player, as a game changer. Okay, if you want to face inequalities, not only the social ones, the technological ones, but also the political ones. Be careful, because we know that international cooperation is not only based anymore on multilateral system. Now we have UN reframing itself, trying to bring another issues. It's very important, another institutional and political arrangement for decision process, but you know that the societies also move forward, and you have philanthropy, you have private sector, business sector, you have really different alliances that come in, partnership, etc., and it's not only the state by state cooperation. You have like-minded cooperation. And like-minded cooperation means in Global South, probably basic, Brazil, South Africa, India, and China plus. And this is fascinating, because what it means that we have the power to come together. This is really new, okay, based on nature assets and the technology, etc., but based on solutions, because you know the traceability of the past, okay? And this is my opinion, is a big challenge. To change, we need to understand two important new players because of the political role. Science and new player, as consider the political and economic role, okay? And it's very important to observe this, because when we discuss tipping point, planetary boundaries, our global commons, etc., we cannot move forward without science. But we need to change the understanding of scientific players as transformative players to come into the different role to make sense that you have not only the global knowledge, but also regional and local ones. And another actor, in my opinion, that is very, very important to be observed, exactly the local ones. Okay, and when you go into the local ones, it's not only the traditional communities, it's very important, etc., subnational players, regional players, as Dolores mentioned, consider Pan-Amazon region, etc., but we need to understand co-responsibilities when we come together. People like to talk about rights, but not about obligations. And I'm so sorry, but we have obligations. Okay, and this is very, very important to observe when you go into this role, to discuss these perspectives. When you go into climate politics, that I used to say this is very important for our agenda, okay, for UNEP, and now for the scientific panel. I'm a co-chair of the scientific panel. We know how huge our challenge is, but it's very important to understand that we need to move from green wishing, I like to do this, to green doing without greenwashing. Okay, green wishing, yes, everyone wants to be green, okay, but nobody knows how to do this. Okay, but we need to understand better what it means for us when you come into this role. And we need to understand how we can value first, economically and socially, and also value nature. If you're not able to do this, well, there, in my nation, there's a board discussing that the new economies that should emerge. We need to understand how impact changing economic systems. If you're not able to do this, as Alberto mentioned, you have in Amazon region a good example. It's a wicked problem. And we need to decouple the things to understand the past and the present, and to bring the future to the present, to tell new stories about the future. Okay, and these are the tensions that have on the table. It's very, very interesting, in my opinion, absolutely fascinating. Also, I think that it's very important to highlight here how South-South will come, or should come. You cannot forget assets, as mentioned, biodiversity, water, oceans, blah, blah, blah. Nature, you have population, pay attention to this, you have inequalities associated to this, and you have alternatives. It's a good combination, okay? Because you can talk about producers, you can talk about consumers, you can talk about traceability, not only about for the big companies, but for the medium companies. They are absolutely strategic national. We need to bring the medium companies into the value chains to make sure that we're in the right direction, okay? And this is very interesting because I know that UNEP is looking forward to come to this agenda and to understand better the local and regional challenges and to understand better how we can come into sustainability for all the people. Everyone must understand this. My feelings and family that it's not true today. Finally, I'd like to highlight two or three things to conclude. I'm trying to manage my papers, okay? Because I have to manage my time. It's unbelievable, okay, but let's do it. Tensions. I think that you have this tension of the present, consider the past, and with the example is deforestation. Deforestation is the past. Even in a country like Brazil, it's a past. Unfortunately, bad. Okay, unfortunately, as a ghost. I'm afraid of ghosts. But we need to understand, as Luana mentioned, and also as inovadoras, we have the environmental crime connected regionally, but we need to understand the role of the international crime RUBs, okay, and how they connect to the environmental crime in our region. Okay, this is not only regional, it's not only based on deforestation. You have really international crime nets or RUBs, different RUBs that are connecting today with this world. And this is very important for us to observe this with that, okay? Because probably go beyond our frontiers, not only the physical ones, but also institutional ones. And it's very important because the rule of law, okay, if you're not able to have a transformative international regime to make countries and society responsible, probably you've got not enough to drive everything that we need to drive to promote not only the Amazon conservation, et cetera, but more than this, to have really new condition of the relationship between humankind and nature. Finally, when you go into distinctions, I think that we need to respect the future. It's something very important. I know that the Secretary General will promote a summit about the future. This is really, really important to understand because this must be touchable, tangible. Okay, the future is not future. The future is now, okay? And I think that we have in Brazil, we used to say that Brazil is the country of the future. It's not true. Brazil must understand better how to be in the future. And in the future, what it means, of the new relationship with time. And in my opinion, I think that is very important, that when you repack the future, make clear based on what you repack is. Okay, because people like to have agreements, et cetera, but based on what are the new commitments that should come, based on our rights and our obligations. My feeling is that here in Brazil, you have 2022 as a past, because you have deforestation back and you have another setbacks. This is a really good picture of the past, okay? But when we go into 2030, we need probably to address this. And it's not only deforestation is a big umbrella of the setbacks that we have in our country and our region. It's not only in our country, because we don't used to come together as South countries. This is a big challenge. Okay, we need to change, reframe how we can come together, not only to face or to tackle deforestation and illegalities or informalities, etc., etc. We wanted the new commitments, considering that we can have not only a solution for ourselves, but share solutions with other parts of the world. This is the global south, the extreme end of the world, that we used to say it last, would be probably the assets of the world. And soon, I hope so. So I think that 2030 is very important to understand. Probably it's not only the end of deforestation that sometimes people want to negotiate, but probably a less risk society. And it's very important that science come if we're able to avoid degraded forests or able to avoid fires, etc., etc. What should happen to understand that to have a less risk society? Why? Because without forests, we cannot achieve 1.5 Celsius degree. Or more than this, we cannot frame or reframe the geopolitical order when you come into nature. And South is very important for this. Finally, we need to understand 2040 or 2050, by 2040, 2050 as a net zero, okay? But it's not clear. It's an open political concept, as you know, okay? But Brazil needs to, and also South America, I think that Pan-Amazon needs to reposition its place in the region, in the world. It's very important because, as I used to say, Amazonia used to put Brazil in the world, and I hope that the climate geopolitics will bring Brazil back to the world. Okay, and it's really, really important that we can come together, not only consider the picture that we have here, well done, etc., but I think that the climate politics in South America must come together to make sure that we have new routes for development of international cooperation. Finally, I cannot forget to highlight here, Brazil used to say, we liked jabuticaba. Jabuticaba is a fruit that only, it's endemic fruit in Brazil, and Brazilians like to say that the world must know jabuticaba. And the world doesn't know anything about jabuticaba. It's impressive. It's delicious for Brazilians. But what I'd like to say here, to move forward, we need to learn with our singularities. Okay? You have singularities. Amazonia is one singularity. Tropical agriculture in Brazil is a singularity. We need to understand this. Okay? And for this, if you understand that we have singularities, we need to propose solutions and we need audacity to do this. You don't need a mimetic behavior. We are creative. You know how to solve the problems. Look, it's absolutely fantastic that one of the most important food producers in the world, food reported less than 45 years ago. So we have the capacity to be transformative in the right direction. For this, we need to have an open mind, and in my opinion, then never forget the rule of democracy. Okay, we have the less of the half of the world on democracy today. Serve this, and you have the erosion of the institution. The movement is coming. Okay, and you need to understand this. Finally, I think that you need to have a new relationship with time. There is no time to buy or to be bought, it's true. But also, I think that we need to learn how to come together and consider the future, not our difference of the past. So I invite you to speak Portuguese to us, to come together. But more than this, I think that we need to make clear for our societies that what our role to change. Okay, the world, not to change our society, change our country, to help support the world, and how you should come together, in my opinion, South climate geopolitics. This is new, okay, and probably, I hope, based on good spirits to make nature an important asset for geopolitical gain. It's change, okay? It's not only the war, okay, but probably hope based on nature. Back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I told you that Isabella would take us to the future. We are in the future now after this. So I would invite who can stay for 10, 15 minutes maximum more for Q&A. So I would just like to open the floor. I understand that we're running out of time. So if you need to leave, I totally get it. So we have some questions online, but I would like to start here with the audience if there is any question from you. Please, Tatiana, yeah.
Thank you. This was excellent. It was so informative and so insightful. I have a question, I think especially to you, Roberto, because you touched on something very important, which is the collaboration with the private markets. And one thing that I was hoping to get more color is actually economics. You can even, I'm being a bit provocative, but you can even argue that crime in India is an economic activity. It is economy. So I recently went to financial markets special on ESG, and I heard this number, which I think is positive and shocking. In the next 9 years, the industry will grow over $1 trillion a year. How are you, I guess all of you, but since you touched the collab with the financial markets or private markets, how are you connecting with this side of the story, which is exploding in the world platform right now?
Well, I think you have two, at least two different aspects on this. The first one is how to value what we call externalities coming from nature, coming from culture. This is not yet clear. And one way to do it is monetizing biodiversity culture, which I think is a wrong way to go. Because differently from carbon is something that you cannot measure in, let's say, tons or things like this. The economy in general and the private sector, they have huge difficulties to deal with things that they cannot measure. So one of the challenges I see in the sector is, and I think they are facing, the financial sector know that they need to deal with this type of situation, is how to deal with values that cannot be measured. But influence the value of their assets and the value of their business. Reputation is one example. They know how to deal somehow with reputation. They know how to deal with risk, country risks and things like this. But they are having huge difficulties to deal with valuing which cannot be measured. That is one thing that I believe is moving fast, but still touching a very small portion of the investment community. They are somehow watching the development of this process. And the other pillar, I believe, that's hugely important on this game is, as I mentioned, the role of the chain coordinator, the large corporation. One example is, let's say, the role of Unilever in the circular economy. They brought a concept of somehow globally, this concept of circular economy, and we see, for instance, the plastic recycling industry growing because that was a very clear sign that came from one of these coordinators, chain coordinators. So I believe that the same thing on traceability is already happening in the beef industry. They know that they need to deal with traceability on a very complex situation, which is beef, for instance, cattle. That is another frontier that I believe is already somehow happening. And finally, the role of the big and large mining company on traceability of gold, illegal gold. That is really damaging their business. So they are getting more and more involved on developing tools on this gold traceability. So these two elements. The first, the increasing role of the chain coordinators. I fully agree with Isabella that the medium-sized companies are absolutely crucial, but the medium-sized companies will move basically following the big ones. So the role of big ones, in my view, must be we need to bring more light on the role of the big corporations. And not on the role of the big corporations on, let's say, beating over their heads, and I think this must continue, this is important, but it's going beyond beating over their heads. I think it's involving them on the solution. And that will affect the other component of valuing non-monetizable assets like biodiversity and culture.
So much. I can take a final round here. There's one question that asks, and I think to Isabella, Dolores, Jamil, Roberto, how to address political pressure and influence given its role in driving agendas. So politics of what we're discussing here. So this is from James Rosenstein that is watching us virtually. Any other questions from here? Please.
Let's talk about the future. Considering that we might have a government change hopefully next year, what are the real conditions for Brazil to commit with deforestation, considering the recent past and also the fiscal constraint that we have today?
You'd like to take that? The Lord also had the change in government, so you can tell what's your hope for the new one.
Well, I have a reflection. I don't think I have an answer. I often sit or listen to politicians, and they always have the excuse of the low base and the short-term of governments. I think civil society and communities have to push a little bit more for state policies for the long term. So this is something that we are all responsible of. And also, I wanted to bring the point, listening to all of us talking about international, not only the crime responsibility, but the international society responsibility. It's a big challenge to make people realize everywhere in the planet that any action might have a consequence or has a consequence of driving changes in the global south. Well, I often laugh about the global south because I actually north of the equator, so I try not to use the global south grouping, but it doesn't matter. I mean, the inequality, the less wealthy countries. So this is something that it's really a big challenge to make everybody aware of how if you work, if you buy something, you might be affecting what's going on for the whole global planet. So this is a challenge that I don't think anybody has found a solution yet. And this is something that we have to all work together. So I don't know, I've seen quick changes when there's a political sign of one way or the other. There was always this excuse of not being able to stop deforestation, but then deforestation with a political sign suddenly increased. And on the other way, if it went wrong so fast, it can go backwards as fast as that as well. So having said that, yeah, we in Colombia, there's a change of government, a recent one, and they've made bold, how you say, bets against deforestation. One of which is making the international community more responsible for what's going on and claiming a change for the debt, international debt, which I think is really a bold but I think it's something that has to be taken seriously. And also things like, the demand, the illicit crops, the demand comes from the north. I mean, this is something that sometimes, I mean, I often get asked about it, and I said, yeah, but the demand is what is driven what's going on. So we have to really tackle the demand, not only the legality or illegality, but the demand. And that goes also as far as gold. People buying, I don't wear jewels. I never wear jewels, but people who are wearing jewels, they don't know where the gold comes from in many, many cases. And no matter whether you say, still is something that we need to work on. This is a political will in a way, but also the private sector will that it's need to be taken in place faster than I think. But again, we're going to be doing as much as possible. And if anybody has a good idea of how to make the world's population aware of what's going on and also drive inequality to a disappearance somehow, also I'm welcome to listen to solutions as well.
Final reflections, Isabella, Jamil?
I think that based on my experience, I learned that we need to act based on realities. It's a trait that Mary, Harris, everyone's on the same level. Okay, and this is a big challenge for environmental consciousness because we used to discuss this without necessarily bring all the people together. So I think that when it comes to the global south, it's what a concrete agenda that makes the difference. Land use, agriculture is absolutely critical, not only the agribusiness, but small agriculture, together with social equalities, and of course, energy, not only energy access, but how you use energy to produce things. Okay, that's why the consumers and producers, they're very important. Brazil is a country very illustrative for this. I want to eat a barbecue without deforestation. I don't need the Chinese to eat this. Brazilians want to eat it. This is very important. 75% of the beef production in Brazil for all the vegans, okay, they are consumed by Brazilians. So we need to believe how the society, national society should be transformative. Act based on the reality, okay? Make sure that you have a challenger, that you have a commitment, and make sure that the society should come together. And of course, if you move forward, you have able to deal with hunger eradication. What's the next step? Quality of food. What quality of food means? Okay, quality of energy access. I like to merge the phrase from the Prime Minister of India. What's energy transition means in India? It's what it means. To add energy source. Okay, under this. We need to understand how unequal we are. And in my opinion, it's very important to make sure that Mary, Harris, and John, everyone's understand that they have a role, important role for this. We need to connect Amazon region with Brazil, the rest of Brazil. Impressive how the Brazilians know a lot about Florida and don't know anything about the Amazon region. It's impressive how they like Orlando and Mickey Mouse and don't like anything about indigenous people. It's impressive. We need to make, okay, you should come to Orlando, it's very funny, very fine, but you need to understand your values, our values. That's why I'm saying that this agenda is absolutely transformative, okay? And means that we should do it everything together and connecting, okay? Because we need to connect the dots, not only the agendas, etc., but connect people. It's absolutely key to connect people. My opinion. So based on reality, make sure that you have good solution in the past, that probably will be a problem in the future, okay? And you need to change. And this is very important to also to give time for people to change. It's also something very important. If you're not able to give time, forget it. Okay, what's happened today, for example, in European countries, the new measures to block international trade, et cetera, based on the deforestation, okay. But they understand the reality of the impact. Be careful, okay? And I think that it's so transformative, very important. It's not disruptive. To be disruptive is to have a good process. If you don't have a good political economic process, probably you have social exclusion, and also more than this, not only social inequality, but to have really social threats. And this is something really painful without solutions. Because when you go into a region that you have the power to change, you cannot share solutions, alternatives to change, it's absolutely the end of the world. Be sure of this, because my last comment, Ilona, I always remember that, okay, I have the lowest rates of deforestation during my term, okay, but I always remember, okay, I took decisions, I changed a lot of things, but this was not enough because we have the setbacks. Okay, it's very important when you understand who you are leaving behind. And unfortunately, this is true, okay, because you have to change. So you have choice to do, and it's not easy, okay, to do this. So make clear the big picture, have a strategy, and make sure that you can have really powerful commitment, economic commitment with the economic sector, and understand the challenge of a country, a huge country, Brazil, that's not on Amazon vision. Okay, Brazil is a country with alternatives. We can do best than we are doing, better than we are doing today. But we need partnerships, alliance, and also commitment to the future to change. If not, we still have the past, the present, and unfortunately, we have setbacks. So make clear what are the challenges. Make clear and build all the conditions to be committed. Not some small group like praying and praying, and even God is so exhausted. Thank you.
So much also to respect already with a 15-minute delay. So thank you so much, everyone. I just want to keep the message that we've done it. We know how to reduce deforestation, but we need to bring people along. And I think that's the key for whoever takes power. And we have to just to make sure they're accountable for their decisions and that we're part of them. So multi-stakeholders coalitions is a very weak problem, but we can do it and we've done it, but we have to do better now with what we learned. So thank you so much. So let me just thank you to all of you that were here, our panelists, to the Baha'i Center also that hosted us here for So thank you so much. To be continued, I invite you all to just join this cause, follow the work of the people that were here, and please visit the Amazon. It's really incredible. And there's some chocolate from the Amazon there. I think there's some still left. And please also serve yourself. There's a lot of breakfast food still. Thank you so much.